good evening, or maybe it's early morning where you are. Wherever you're listening from, thank you for being here. This story begins quietly, just like many lives in America do. He did not wake up that day planning to change his future. There was no big dream written on paper, no dramatic promise, no loud motivation speech playing in his head. It was just another normal day. The alarm rang too early. The room was still dark. Outside, the city was already moving. Buses, cars, footsteps rushing somewhere important. He sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the floor. America had not been easy for him. The language felt heavy on his tongue. Simple conversations made him nervous. Every mistake sounded louder than it really was. He had come to this country hoping for opportunity, but hope alone did not pay rent. Hope did not explain words he couldn't understand. Hope did not protect him from feeling small in a big place. That morning he had a choice, not a big one, not the kind people talk about in success stories, just a small decision. So small, most people would forget it by the end of the day. He could stay silent, like he usually did. Or he could try, just once. No guarantee, no applause waiting, no promise that it would work. But something inside him whispered, "Try anyway." And that was it. That small decision did not change his life immediately. It did not make him rich. It did not make him confident overnight, but it started something. A quiet shift, a slow movement forward, a direction he had never walked before. Many people think life changes in one big moment. But in America, especially for those who are not native speakers, life often changes in silence, in small choices made when no one is watching. Tonight, you will hear a story about one of those choices. If you have ever felt invisible here, if you have ever struggled to find the right words, if you have ever wondered whether small steps really matter, then stay with me, because sometimes one small decision is enough to change everything. Part 1. The Quiet Beginning. The decision itself was small, but the place where it happened mattered. He had been living in America for just over a year, not long enough to feel settled, not short enough to feel new. Every day followed the same pattern. Wake up early, go to work, listen more than he spoke, smile when he did not fully understand. At work, English surrounded him. Fast, casual, confident. People joked, people complained, people spoke without thinking. He listened carefully, trying to catch meaning from tone and body language. Sometimes he understood the idea, but not the words. Sometimes he understood the words, but not the feeling behind them. So he stayed quiet. Silence felt safer. Silence did not expose his mistakes. Silence did not invite confusion, but silence also built distance. His coworkers did not dislike him. They just didn't know him. During lunch breaks, they sat together. They talked about sports, families, weekend plans. He sat nearby, pretending to check his phone, pretending he was busy, pretending he chose to be alone. The truth was harder. He was afraid of saying the wrong thing, afraid of asking people to repeat themselves, afraid of slowing the conversation down. In his home country, he had never felt this way. Words had always come easily. His voice had always mattered. Here, his voice felt small. That morning, before work, he stood in line at a small coffee shop, the kind of place with handwritten menus and tired workers behind the counter. When it was his turn, the cashier smiled and asked a simple question. "How's your morning going?" Normally, he would answer with one word. Good. Then look away. But that morning something felt different. He hesitated. His heart beat a little faster. Not because the question was hard, but because the answer might be. He could choose the safe path, or he could choose the uncomfortable one. So he spoke. Not perfectly, not confidently, but honestly. It's okay. Still learning how mornings work here. The sentence wasn't smooth. The grammar wasn't perfect, but it was real. The cashier laughed gently, not at him, but with him. Yeah, she said. Mornings here are rough. It was a short exchange, less than 10 seconds, but for him, it felt important. For the first time that day, he didn't disappear into silence. He had stepped forward, just a little. And he didn't know it yet, but that moment was practice. For many moments to come. Part 2. The Weight of Silence. That short conversation stayed with him longer than he expected. All day at work, he replayed it in his head. Not the words themselves, but the feeling after. Nothing bad had happened. No one laughed at him. No one corrected him harshly. The world did not stop. And yet, something inside him had moved. He began to notice how often he chose silence. Not because he had nothing to say, but because he was afraid of how it would sound. Silence had become his shield. At meetings, he nodded. At jokes, he smiled. When questions were asked, he looked down. People assumed he was shy. Some thought he was uninterested. A few thought he didn't care. None of them knew the truth. Every silent moment carried weight. Each time he didn't speak, he felt a small loss. Not a dramatic one. Just a quiet disappointment in himself. He remembered how different he used to be. Back home, he spoke freely. He told stories. He explained ideas. Here, he measured every word before it left his mouth. Sometimes, he stopped the sentence before it even started. That evening, after work, he rode the bus home. He sat by the window, watching the city pass by. American life moved fast. People talked loudly on their phones. Strangers chatted without hesitation. He wondered how they made it look so easy. Was it confidence or just practice? That thought stayed with him. Practice, not talent, not perfect grammar, just practice. Later that night, he stood in his small kitchen, heating leftovers. The room was quiet. Too quiet. He realized something uncomfortable. Silence had protected him, but it had also kept him invisible. No one could connect with someone they never heard. That night, he made a promise. Not a big one. He didn't promise fluency. He didn't promise confidence. He promised something smaller. Tomorrow, he would speak one more sentence than usual. Just one. Not to impress anyone. Not to sound smart. Just to be present. He didn't know if it would change anything, but for the first time in a long while, he felt like he was choosing growth over comfort. And that choice, as small as it seemed, was already shaping the person he was becoming. Part 3. One sentence more. The next morning did not feel special. The same alarm, the same routine, the same quiet thoughts. But the promise he made the night before stayed with him. One more sentence. At work, the day began like always. Emails, tasks, small talk floating through the room. He focused on his screen, trying not to overthink. Then it happened. A coworker leaned over and asked a simple question. Did you finish the report? Normally, his answer would end quickly. Yes. Or almost. Safe, efficient, invisible. But today, he remembered his promise. He paused, just long enough to breathe. Yes, he said, and I sent it this morning. Let me know if anything needs to change. The sentence was not perfect, but it was complete. The coworker nodded. Great, thanks. And just like that, it was over. No tension, no embarrassment, no negative reaction. He sat back in his chair, surprised. Nothing bad had happened again. Later that day, during lunch, he sat at the same table as always. But this time, he listened more closely. Someone mentioned the weekend. Without planning it, he spoke. I stayed home, he said. Trying to get used to the cold. A small comment, almost forgettable, but someone laughed. Yeah, winters here are no joke, another coworker replied. A short conversation followed. Nothing deep, nothing personal, but it included him. That feeling, being included, was new, not exciting, not dramatic, just warm. As the day went on, he noticed something else. The more he spoke, the less his body resisted. His shoulders relaxed, his breathing slowed. He realized fear had been louder than reality. People were not waiting for him to fail. They were just living their lives. That afternoon, he made another small adjustment. When he didn't understand something, he asked, Sorry, can you say that again? The words felt heavy at first, but each time he used them, they felt lighter. As he left work that day, he understood something important. Fluency was not built in silence. Confidence did not arrive by waiting. They grew from small risks, taken daily, one sentence at a time. And tomorrow, he planned to add one more. Part 4, Outside the Comfort Zone. By the end of that week, something had changed. Not in a way others could clearly see, but in a way he could feel. Speaking no longer felt like stepping off a cliff. It felt more like walking onto unfamiliar ground. Still uncomfortable, but solid. On Saturday morning, he decided to leave his apartment. Normally, weekends were quiet, too quiet. He stayed inside, watched videos, scrolled on his phone, let time pass. But that day, he wanted something different. He walked to a nearby grocery store, a place he had visited many times. Always quickly, always silently. As he moved through the aisles, he heard voices around him. Casual conversations, easy laughter. At the checkout counter, the cashier looked up. Did you find everything okay? The familiar question returned. His heart beat faster, but not as fast as before. Yes, he said. And this store is busier today. The cashier smiled. Yeah, weekends are always like this. Another small exchange, another moment where silence didn't win. Outside, holding the grocery bag, he felt something unexpected. Pride. Not loud pride. Not the kind you share online. Quiet pride. The kind that belongs only to you. Later that afternoon, he went for a walk. No destination. Just movement. At a crosswalk, an older man stood beside him. They waited for the light to change. Cold wind, long silence. Then the man spoke. Feels like winter came early this year. Normally, he would nod and smile. But today, he answered, Yeah, I wasn't ready for it. They shared a brief laugh. The light changed. They walked in different directions. That was all. No friendship, no future conversation. But that moment mattered. He was no longer just observing America. He was participating in it. That evening, back in his apartment, he reflected on the week. Nothing dramatic had happened. No breakthrough. No transformation story. But he felt more present in his own life. The small decision he made that morning, to speak just a little more, was no longer just about language. It was about choosing not to hide. And slowly, day by day, that choice was becoming a habit. Part 5. When fear pushes back. Growth did not move in a straight line. After a few good days, fear returned. Quietly, but firmly. It happened during a meeting, nothing important, just a regular discussion about tasks and deadlines. People spoke quickly. Ideas moved from one person to another. He followed most of it, but not all. Then his manager looked at him. "What do you think?" The room went still. This was different. This was not a cashier, not a stranger on the street. This was work. This was responsibility. For a moment, old habits rushed back. His chest tightened. His mind searched for the safest escape. Say something short. Say nothing risky. End it fast. Time slowed. He could feel everyone waiting. Not impatient, just curious. He took a breath. "I think the timeline is possible," he said slowly. "But we may need more time for testing." The words came out uneven. His accent was clear. His voice was softer than he wanted. Silence followed. 1 second, 2 seconds. Then the manager nodded. "That's a good point," she said. "We should consider that." The conversation continued. Just like that. His heart was still racing, but something inside him settled. He had spoken, not perfectly, but honestly. After the meeting, he went back to his desk. His hands shook slightly. Fear hadn't disappeared, but it hadn't won either. Later that day, doubt crept in. Did I sound stupid? Was my English too slow? Did they understand me? These thoughts felt familiar, heavy, persistent. But this time he didn't let them grow. He reminded himself of something important. Fear always speaks after the moment has passed. It tries to rewrite the story. But the truth was simple. He had been heard. He had been understood. That evening, walking home, he realized something new. Courage did not mean feeling ready. It meant acting before readiness arrived. The small decision he made days ago was no longer small. It was testing him. And he was learning that discomfort was not a sign to stop. It was a sign to continue. Part 6. Being seen. Something subtle began to happen. People started to notice him, not in a dramatic way. No sudden attention, no spotlight, just small shifts. Co-workers began to include him more often. They asked his opinion. They waited for his response. Not because his English was perfect, but because he was present. During conversations, he no longer stood on the edge. He stood inside the circle. One afternoon, a coworker stopped by his desk. "Hey, do you have a minute?" Before, that question would have filled him with tension. Now, it felt different. "Sure," he said. They talked about a small problem. He explained his ideas slowly, carefully. The coworker listened. "That makes sense," she said. "Thanks for explaining." Those words stayed with him. Thanks for explaining. No one had ever said that to him here before. After work, he joined a few people for coffee. He didn't talk much, but he talked enough. He asked questions. He laughed at the right moments. He shared small details about his life. Nothing personal, nothing heavy, but it was real. On the way home, he thought about how far he had come. Not far in distance, but far in courage. Weeks ago, he had felt invisible. Now he felt recognized, still learning, still careful, but no longer hidden. He also noticed something else. The more he spoke, the more patient he became with himself. Mistakes no longer felt like failure. They felt like part of the process. That night, he practiced English quietly, not out of fear, but out of respect for his own growth. He understood now. Speaking was not about sounding like a native. It was about allowing himself to exist fully in this place. The small decision he made had opened a door, and he was no longer standing outside. Part 7. The Shift Within. One evening, after another long day, he sat alone on the bus ride home. The city lights passed by the window, soft and distant. He wasn't thinking about English. He wasn't replaying conversations in his head. That was new. For the first time since arriving in America, his mind felt quiet. Not empty, but calm. He realized something important. The biggest change was not in how others treated him. It was in how he treated himself. He no longer apologized in his head before speaking. He no longer assumed he was a burden. He had stopped waiting for permission to take up space. That shift was small, but powerful. He remembered his first months in America, how every interaction felt like a test, how every mistake felt permanent. Now mistakes passed quickly. People forgot them. Life moved on. He finally understood what many native speakers never had to learn. Language is not a performance. It is a bridge. You don't need to build a perfect bridge. You just need one strong enough to walk across. That night, he called his family back home, something he used to avoid because he didn't want to explain his struggles. This time, he spoke honestly. He talked about work, about learning, about feeling less afraid. His voice sounded steadier than he expected. After the call ended, he sat quietly for a moment. He wasn't proud of fluency. He was proud of courage. The small decision he made, to speak one more sentence, had quietly reshaped his life, not by changing who he was, but by allowing who he already was, to be seen. And he knew now, this was only the beginning. Part 8. A different kind of strength. Months passed, not quickly, not easily, but steadily. He did not become the loudest voice in the room. He did not suddenly sound like a native speaker. That was never the goal. What changed was something deeper. He stopped measuring his value by his accent. He stopped translating his thoughts before allowing them to exist. English was no longer an obstacle standing in front of his life. It became a tool. Imperfect, but useful. At work, he was trusted with more responsibility, not because he spoke flawlessly, but because he communicated clearly enough. People knew what he meant, and that was enough. Outside of work, his world grew wider. Short conversations turned into familiar faces. Familiar faces turned into recognition. Recognition turned into belonging. One afternoon, a new coworker joined the team. Quiet, careful, watching more than speaking. He noticed the signs immediately, the hesitation, the forced smile, the silence. During lunch, he sat next to him. "So, how long have you been in the U.S.?" he asked. The question was simple, The answer came slowly. As he listened, something shifted. He was no longer just surviving here. He was helping someone else find their footing. In that moment, he understood the full meaning of his small decision. It was never just about speaking English. It was about choosing courage when comfort felt easier. It was about showing up before confidence arrived. Life in America had not changed overnight. It was still demanding, still imperfect. But he was no longer waiting to feel ready. He had learned something powerful. You don't need a big moment to change your life. You need a small decision, repeated consistently. And that decision, made quietly on an ordinary day, had changed everything. If you are still listening, thank you. That tells me something about you. Maybe this story felt familiar. Maybe parts of it sounded like your own life. Living in America as a non-native speaker is not easy. Not because people are unkind, but because silence can slowly make you feel invisible. This story was never about perfect English. It was never about becoming someone else. It was about one small decision. The decision to speak. Even when your voice feels uncertain. The decision to try. Even when confidence hasn't arrived yet. You don't need to change everything today. You don't need big courage. Just a small step. One sentence more than yesterday. If this story helped you feel understood, if it reminded you that your voice matters, even with an accent, even with mistakes, then you are not alone. This channel is here for people like you, people who are learning, people who are growing quietly, people who are building a life, one small decision at a time. If you want to continue this journey, consider subscribing to the channel. Not for motivation, not for pressure, just for stories that remind you that progress is possible, even when it feels slow. Thank you for listening. Take your time, and when you're ready, speak one more sentence.